My name is Brandy Kitzmiller, and I am a program analyst with the Community Food Systems Division. Today, you'll be hearing from my colleagues Winston Scrett and Jean Bigham, who all support our Farm to School grant program. I hope that everyone has had the opportunity to attend the RFA overview webinar on November 8th. That webinar focused on the core information in the RFA. But if you were unable to attend, no worries. The RFA overview webinar was recorded and will be available on the grantee resource page. Today's webinar will focus on getting your farm school grant application package together. During this webinar, along with my colleagues, we will provide information on aligning your proposal with the grant program priorities, building your grant writing team, the do's and don'ts when writing the proposal narrative, and creating your budget and grant matching requirements. Now I'll pass it over to you, Winston.
Hi, everyone. As Brandy mentioned, my name is Winston, and just like her, I am a program analyst with the Community Food Systems Division. I want to take this time to remind everyone that the RFA is the primary reference document for the Farm to School opportunity, and you carefully read it before beginning an application. The link to the RFA and supporting documents are posted on the CFSDS website. Please make sure to bookmark the grant applicant resource page, which also includes information about previous Farm to School awardees. This section of the webinar will provide important information on how you should align your proposal with the grant program and funding priorities. The Farm to School grant program was created by the Richard B. Russell National School Lunch Act in 2010. The legislation directed USDA to support farm to school programs that improve access to local foods in eligible schools. The National School Lunch Act highlights several areas of focus. The Secretary of Agriculture is directed through the NSLA to ensure geographical diversity and equitable treatment of urban, rural, and tribal communities in the distribution of grant awards, giving the highest priority to projects that emphasize legislative priorities. Whenever possible, connect your application back to the legislative priorities highlighted here. This is especially important when writing your proposal goals. Make sure to address how they connect to the overall priorities of the Farm to School grant program. Applicants of all grant tracks may receive bonus priority points during the reviewing process if they fall into one of these grant funding priority categories. Applicants can declare if they meet a priority group using a checklist in Appendix C of the RFA. This document also describes how bonus priority points will be awarded. Are not requirements for receiving an award, but rather priorities that will help give your application a scoring boost. The FY23 Farm to School grant program takes a comprehensive approach to advancing equity for all in Farm to School programming. Others who have been historically underserved, marginalized, adversely affected by persistent poverty and inequality. I would like to take this opportunity to remind you that applicants may choose one of the 3 grant tracks when they apply to a Farm to School grant. The turnkey track is back again for fiscal year 23. F&S identified common activities as well as some new opportunities within the Farm to School landscape and turned those into 4 possible projects, which are action planning, agriculture curriculum, and edible gardens. The available projects may be good fit for a wide variety of applicants. Applicants to turnkey grants choose one of 3 projects and agree to complete all. Each of the 3 turnkey projects vary in period of performance to an extent entity eligibility. For example, state agencies are not eligible to apply for the action planning, agriculture education curriculum, or edible garden turnkey projects. And the turnkey action plan period of performance is only 12 months. Request of award period and or amount specified in the RFA will not be considered. The implementation grant track is for organizations who may have farm to school experience who want to define their own activities. Implementation grant applicants may be interested in a multifaceted project that incorporates one or more elements found in the turnkey track, such as edible gardening and ag education. An application is permitted per applicant. Organizations interested in turnkey project, but who also want to create their own activities may find that implementation is more appropriate. Implementation grants are available up to $500,000 only for projects with national or multi-state scope. If an entity applies for an implementation grant in excess of $100,000, up to $500,000, the applicant must clearly indicate the national or multi-state scope of its projects in the application materials. If FNS cannot verify the national or multi-state scope based on the information contained in the application materials, the application may be removed from consideration. Note that as stated in the RFA, final decisions on 500,000 requests are subject to final appropriations language. Please see the RFA for more information. The state agency grant track is specifically for state agencies looking to support their state. Proposed state agency grant activities must support the required objective: improve access to local foods and edible schools through the comprehensive farm to school program that includes local procurement and agriculture education efforts. Similar to the implementation track, USDA will consider proposals up to $500,000 from state agencies. The final award decision will depend upon the final appropriations language, and you should reference the RFA for more information.
1 second. We're having some technical difficulties with the voice going in and out, Winston.
Okay.
It could be an internet issue. So Brandy is going to do the next bit of slides, as long as we can keep the slides moving, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, sorry about that, everybody. So now that you've chosen your farm to school grant track and you have determined your project's approach, the next important step is to identify the appropriate partners to build your grant writing team. Building a grant writing team requires research and careful planning. We highly encourage that you start having these conversations sooner than later. As you reach out to potential members, be specific with your objectives. Some key points to keep in mind include the members, availability and their capacity, their specific role, not only in the RFA writing process, but also in the proposed project. I also want to highlight that if your organization is not a school, childcare, or summer institution operating a child nutrition program, you must include at least one letter of commitment from a school, childcare institution, or summer institution operating the NSLP, CACFP, SFSP, and or the school breakfast program, or from a state agency administering NSLP, CACFP, SFSP, and or the school breakfast program. This letter does count toward the 3-letter limit. It does count. When selecting team members for your grant writing team, make sure you reach out to members that can offer a variety of perspectives in which you can incorporate into your grant writing. For example, if you are planning to incorporate farm to school activities into the school standard curriculum, it would be appropriate to obtain teachers' input and buy-in prior to starting a new program. You may also consider whether your organization has connections with any prior farm to school grant recipients. Organizations that have been successfully funded in the past may be able to provide valuable insight as you prepare your application. Now we are going to cover the process of how to write a successful proposal narrative. It is important to start preparing your application early to give yourself time to correct mistakes and make the necessary changes. Be aware of the fact that any information that comes after the page limit has been reached will be disregarded and not reviewed. Page limits are listed on the slide, but to emphasize a few points, remember that turnkey applications are limited to 3 pages maximum, while state agency and implementation applications are limited to 5 pages for their proposal narrative, plus an additional 3 pages for their project work plan table. Note that all applications must also include a budget narrative section, but there is no page limit on the budget narrative, so make sure you include sufficient detail in the budget section. Staff work experiences from their resumes should align with the job description in the proposal narrative and can only be 1 page per resume. Any additional pages will be disregarded. Let's head over to the next slide for some writing tips. Before submitting your application for review through the grants.gov system, please double check to make sure you have all of the required sections and attachments. Points will be deducted from your application if required sections are omitted. Each section of the application is worth a different amount of points. You can find more information on the point system for each section and how your application will be scored in sections 5.2.1 to 5.2.3 in the RFA. Are you curious how you may score with our reviewers? Finish completing your application and allow someone unfamiliar with your project to score and critique your application using the scores starting in sections 5.2.1 of the RFA. This tip gives your application another eye outside of your own to catch things you may have missed while writing your sections. Implementation and state agency applicants are required to use the objectives listed here, which you can also find on section 1.5.1 of the RFA. Applicants to the implementation and state agency track may propose any combination of activities that align with the required Farm to School grant program objectives stated above. It is important that your proposal application supports the objective listed here. You must clearly state in your application how proposed activities align with these required objectives. For the implementation track, your application can be any combination of activities as long as they support the objective. Some examples of activities may be developing and implementing integrated curriculum to reinforce food and nutrition-based learning throughout the school environment or on local farms. Or it might be bringing more unprocessed and value-added, minimally processed, regionally sourced meal components into the cafeteria. For the state agency track, some specific examples of activities that may be used that align with the required objective may be building, expanding, and/or regularly convening a network of key partners, or facilitating peer-to-peer learning among program operators or with other states or agencies to improve program efficiency and learn best practices. Don't feel like you have to limit yourself to only the objectives specifically identified in the RFA. As state agency or implementation applicants, you have the opportunity to propose innovative or unique projects as long as they align with the required objective. Applicants applying to the turnkey action planning track agree to conduct specific activities defined by FNS, culminating in the development of a written farm to school action plan for submission to FNS at the end of the period of performance. The Agricultural Education Curriculum Development and Delivery Project focuses on connecting students with their food, and/or preparing them for careers in agricultural through thoughtful and relevant agricultural education. The Edible Garden Project focuses on developing or improving food-producing gardens based at schools and/or CACFP SFSP sites. Please note, for the purposes of this opportunity, Edible Garden includes any food production operation based at an eligible school or CACFP summer site, including gardens, indoor grow towers, greenhouses, farms, aquaponics, livestock, etc. As turnkey applicants, you are agreeing to complete the activities defined in the RFA. If you have an innovative project design in mind or a proposal that would combine elements from multiple turnkey tracks, then the implementation track might be better suited to you. Demonstrating your organization's capacity to successfully implement your project is critical. However, don't forget to describe how your past successes will translate into successes at implementing Farm to School. For turnkey applicants, you want to first identify the target population for your project while describing the Farm to School initiatives within the participant population and explain how your proposed project aligns with your overall Farm to School plan. This will allow the reviewers to see the full picture of your organization's background and how it fits into your proposed plan. For implementation and state agency applicants, you must also first identify your target population while also mentioning all relevant information that tells the status of Farm to School initiatives in your organization. You want reviewers to know you have relevant experience implementing Farm to School activities. For example, if you have planned trainings or implemented curriculum development or procurement strategies, then state those in this section as evidence that your organization is equipped to successfully execute the proposed project. In a nutshell, for all grant types, applicants should clearly align your organization's experience with your current proposed project, including any Farm to School initiatives you have been a part of in the past. Your application should clearly demonstrate your community's specific need when it comes to your project. When identifying your community's specific needs, make sure your organization's participant population is included in that description, particularly if you will serve any priority groups. This is a great place to tie in the data that you entered on the Farm to School cover sheet about the population your project will serve. Reviewers of your application should be able to visualize your community because you were illustrative, compelling, and you used relevant data. The links presented in this presentation can be utilized to support further research. The project work plan narrative and table section is worth 50 points in the turnkey grant type and 30 points combined in the implementation and state agency tracks, but are equally valuable in setting the stage for your project and its deliverables. This may be a section that applicants want to begin first, even though it will not appear first in the application. All applicants are required to submit a project work plan table, and the RFA has templates available. In particular, turnkey applicants are strongly encouraged to use the template pre-populated with activities in sections 4.2.1 through 4.2.3. If you apply for a turnkey grant and change or remove activities from those that are included in the RFA, then you could receive a reduced score during review or even be subject to removal from consideration. Be sure you follow all application instructions for using the provided turnkey narrative templates. Please note that the implementation track and state agency track are separate grant tracks, each with its own unique eligibility requirements, including eligible activities. All proposed activities must lead to accomplishing the objective mentioned earlier in the implementation and state agency applicants. Please ensure that you apply only to the track for which you are eligible. FNS will not consider the application if the applicant submitted to an incorrect or ineligible category. If a staff member wears multiple hats in the organization and they were assigned various responsibilities in this project, be clear of the time and effort / percentage allocated to the project. Because there are only 3 resumes permitted per application, include staff members that will have the most responsibility. Also, make sure resumes are clear and reflect relevant experience necessary for assigned tasks. You can tie in your letters of commitment as well by referencing them here. This will make it clear for reviewers that the supporting documents you provided are relevant and aligned with your proposal narrative. Remember that there is also a limit of 3 letters of commitment. Describing previous experience makes it clear that the personnel you have chosen for the project are appropriate. And it's okay if you don't have all the key staff on board now. If you plan to hire new staff to conduct project activities, be sure to describe the knowledge and skills you'll look for when hiring and the responsibilities of the position once filled. Take the measurements at the start of the project so it will be clear how much growth has occurred. Your application should be specific with what data will be collected, when the data will be collected, who will collect and analyze the data, and how will the data be collected, such as what instruments, tools, or surveys. Be sure to mention what toolkit you might use to collect the data. You don't have to commit to building your own resource from the ground up when you can find one that's already out there. Be clear and describe any existing resources that are available to be incorporated into your project, other grants, donations, fundraising activities, etc. Also, identify particular objectives which will remain in place after the period ends. Use the history of relationships with local stakeholders to show grant reviewers that there are existing partnerships to support post-grant activities. If a large percentage of the budget is dedicated to personnel expenses, be specific about how their role or time commitment will change. Letters of commitment pertain to all applicants. When choosing what letters of commitment to include in your application, consider key partners and stakeholders, contractors, or support organizations who have explicit role in executing the proposed project. For example, for a nonprofit working with schools to increase local procurement, include a joint letter of commitment from the food service director of the target schools. Or for a school seeking to launch integrated agricultural education, include a letter of commitment from a school administrator from the school that will incorporate the curriculum. And remember, letters of support are different than your match letters. If a turnkey or implementation applicant does not operate the NSLP, CACFP, SFSP, and/or the school breakfast program, the applicant must include at least one letter of commitment from a school, childcare institution, or summer institution operating the NSLP, CACFP, SFSP, and/or school breakfast program, or from a state agency administering NSLP, CACFP, SFSP, and/or the school breakfast program. This letter does count toward the 3-letter limit. Please also note that applicants to the state agency track that do not administer one or more child nutrition programs in the state are required to include a letter of commitment from the relevant CNP administering state agency. Now I will turn it over to Jean to discuss your budget and budget narrative portion of your proposed project.
Thank you, Brandy. The next couple of slides will be focused on the required budget form and the required budget narrative. Applicants must provide a completed SF 424A form, which breaks out the proposed budget specific categories. The first page of this form provides the total budget for your proposed project. The federal amount requested is noted on line 1 under column E under the new or revised section. The second line is for non-federal funds or the matching funds. This is the total that you, the applicant, are proposing to contribute. The non-federal matching amount should be listed on line 2 in column F. The form will total the 2 amounts for the overall requested budget total as shown as on this example. On this page of the SF 424A, which is identified as section B, you will provide a breakdown of the federal amount requested and the non-federal match by budget category. The categories listed on the form and the amount should align with your budget narrative and the budget which you have submitted. There is a line for construction, however, Construction is not an allowable expense as a federal request or a match contribution through the Farm to School grant program. The form will total these amounts as direct charges. Applicants may choose to apply an approved indirect cost rate as well. Budget narrative. The purpose of the budget narrative is to explain and justify the estimated costs by line item or category related to the proposed project. An itemized budget narrative with justification or rationale must be submitted using the appropriate project narrative format. In addition to the budget narrative template found on Appendix D, the budget narrative should be formatted using the budget categories listed on the SF 424, which are personnel, fringe, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual, other and indirect costs only. Contractual expenses related to the budget categories are included and should be included in contractual costs. A few key points to highlight when writing your budget narrative. Applicants are encouraged to use the budget narrative template form located in Appendix D, page 55 and 56 of the RFA. You must show by line item both federal and match. Make sure that any mathematical calculations are correct. You can export the budget, narrative template in Word, to Excel to ensure your calculations are correct. However, the budget must be submitted in the Word format. Clearly explain the link between the budget items and the project goals and your objectives. Cross-check the budget narrative template and proposal narrative, your SF 424 and your SF 424A to ensure that the requested funding is consistent with the item descriptions in the proposal narrative and the costs match. Estimates are fine. Again, when included with an explanation of how they are calculated. Distinctly label items purchased with federal funds and those purchased with matching funds. For 24-month proposals, please separate the first and second year expenditures. Line item budgets without an accompanying budget narrative could receive much lower scores and could require additional clarification. All funding requests must be in whole dollars. We have also provided a budget checklist on page 57 of the RFA. Please make sure to review the sample budget narrative available in the grant website. Indirect costs. These indirect costs are those that are shared across a program. Although requesting indirect costs is optional, please note that the up-to-date indirect cost agreement, or NICRA, must be submitted with the application. The indirect cost is not applied to all budget categories. So in the budget narrative, please be sure to explain what expenses the rate is being applied to and provide the calculation to support that request. Excuse me, coughing again. Applicants are required to provide a match of no less than 25% of the total budget and can come only from non-federal sources. USDA will contribute no more than 75% of the total project total. Therefore, the non-federal match must be at least 25% of the project cost. Failure to show evidence of matching support of at least 25% of the total budget will result in removal of an application from consideration for award. This would be additional letters that you would need to supply. Here are examples of match contributions. In your budget narrative, you should place a monetary amount on each type of contribution. Equipment or volunteer time are examples. And as with the federal request, provide the calculation that shows how the dollar amount was derived. If it's a piece of equipment you already have on hand, just note that it's current inventory and this is the estimated value. Please note that Appendix B of the RFA provides information about allowable and unallowable costs for both federal and match. We'll now transition back to Brandy to discuss our resources.
Thanks, Jean. So there are many resources available to you on the Farm to School website listed here. We have a variety of fact sheets, guides, and recorded webinars there for your reference. I'll highlight a few now that might be of interest when working on a grant and partnering with schools. Familiarize yourself with our grant applicant resources page. See the image of the resources page listed here. You can find some getting started guides, application templates, as well as the recordings of this webinar and the previous one, which will be available in the next week or so. We also offer technical assistance resources online. CFSD has developed more than 20 fact sheets to support various farm to school stakeholders, from incorporating local food in school cafeterias to gardens and tribal communities. We offer fact sheets on a wide variety of farm to school topics. And also, please subscribe to The Dirt to stay up to date on all things CFSD, in particular the Farm to School Grant RFA, and to see what are some current active Farm to School grantees are up to. Thank you all so much for listening and participating in this year's presentation. We hope it was informative to you and your organization. The recording will be stopped now.